Project Heroes is an action/adventure RPG being made in Unreal Engine 5 by a single rookie developer. That developer is me. I'm the developer. I have experience modding games with a successful alternate history mod for a Paradox Interactive game called Europa Universalis 4, but this is my first foray into real deal game development. So far, the project has progressed by leaps and bounds, with the first 2 months seeing incredible development. In the first two devlogs, which will be in a playlist linked in the description if you need to catch up, we set up most of the core systems that will be required for the minimum viable product I have in mind for the project. These include, but are not limited to, class selection, character creation, a complete stat system including leveling that scales stats based on class, an inventory and an associated equipment system, with the equipment system including physical item attachment to the player with equipping and sheathing actions to simulate readying and retiring from combat. Combat includes melee and magic, with many different types of weapons added and tested, with main hand plus shield, two hand, as well as consumable items, all fully functional. To complement consumables, I've implemented a condition system that allows players and NPCs to be affected by conditions that are on a timer, complete with stat changes and that built-in timer to remove said conditions. We also have a really cool system that I've dubbed the focused movement system, in which the player can right-click and hold it to fine-tune their character's controls, turning and moving in precise directions, kind of like Project Zomboid. And for today's devlog, we're going to dive into something that I have very little experience with, and honestly, I was quite intimidated when I started the process. That topic would be level design. Creating the world that the player will interact with for the 20 to 30 plus hours that I hope to pack into Project Heroes. Creating an interesting organic world for the player to experience is challenging from a creative standpoint, but various other things like the fixed isometric camera that I decided on, it introduces quite a few additional problems. At times I felt like I wasn't actually even progressing that much, but after spending a couple of weeks on it, I definitely think I have something that I'm proud to show off. I'm also super stoked to let you guys know that the Project Heroes Discord is officially live. You can check it out. It's going to be linked in the description. It's going to be the best place to get a hold of me if you have something that you'd like to tell me about the project, or, give me any advice, tips, tricks, that sort of thing. I definitely appreciate all of that, as well as I'll probably be posting some fun teasers in there if you're interested in a sort of behind the curtains look, as if these devlogs aren't already doing that. But as is tradition around here, before we get into the stuff that I said we're going to talk about in today's devlog, I'm going to talk about a couple of housekeeping things that I took care of in the meantime, including tweaking the loot dropping system from NPCs. With slain enemies dropping items from that loot table and assigning rarity, as well as scaling modifiers based on said rarity, as well as the addition of a slick little damage indicator that will pop up above any enemy or the player's head whenever they are hit in combat. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually super happy with how it turned out. I think it looks really slick. Big fan of this. And with the expectation of adding a sort of elemental resistance / elemental damage system, I made it so depending on the spell and or the damage type being dealt, the number will change color. So that's pretty cool. And one of the cool things I wanted to do with the damage indicator was make it kind of a cool kind of party confetti effect whenever you get a crit. So I added that, and I think that turned out super good as well. I then revisited the way that I was presenting rarity for items specifically that were in the world, and made the particle effects flow kind of into the item as if it's kind of like absorbing the power from around it. I also made it so it actually puts off light into the air. I think it looked pretty nice. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was getting pretty sick of punching skeletons, so I set up a system where the character can actually pull the weapon out of their sheath and equip it, swing it. Don't mind that the dagger's upside down. I'll fix that eventually. But on top of that, I set it up so the player is able to switch their weapons as well as sheath weapons that they have equipped with their own assigned equip and sheath animations. I then set it up so you can only equip an item or change your equipped item if your currently wielded weapon is sheathed. That way you can't just change your weapon mid-swing. I'm not necessarily sure if it's the best way to go about it, but for now it's what we're rolling with. And we're going to talk about maps and stuff like that, but just take a second to admire this. I think that this turned out super well. The loot rarity stuff, I think that this is what we're going to roll with. Let me know what you think in the comments below, because I'm definitely curious, but I think that this is definitely the best iteration I've come up with yet, and I think we're going to roll with it. Just look at it at night. I set it up so they glow, like I said, but I also made it so the higher the rarity, the more intense the glow is. So when somebody drops a legendary sword in a cave, you will know, and it will be very clear that that sword is worth picking up, or at least looking into. Oh, and I also set it up so even the base common loot at least glows a little bit, so it's clear that there is something on the floor, because I know that sometimes the meshes might be a little hard to to see. So I want to give the player at least some form of a visual indicator. But now on to the main entree of today's devlog. We're going to talk a little bit about world design. I kind of decided on a mostly flat terrain to roll with, and then I did a little bit of what in the industry is known as gray boxing or boxing out, where you essentially kind of set up some placeholder cubes and or buildings that you use as placeholders to then replace with your fabricated buildings, modular buildings, whatever you decide to go with at a later date. And I spent quite a bit of time doing this, kind of just more toying with things to kind of see what I was doing, because I didn't really have any experience with it. I had a general idea of what I wanted the layout to be, but I wasn't necessarily sure exactly how to go about it. So this was a really helpful sort of thing for me, but I didn't actually end up going with what I was building on screen right now. I ended up scrapping it and building in a completely new environment from the ground up, and I think it actually turned out much better. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Town 1. In the original Rise of Heroes is called Kishkin, but I haven't really decided on a town name specifically, but it's kind of intended to be a quiet little cozy town nestled in the mountains with the ocean and or a giant body of water on the left side. It is going to act as the tutorial town, but also it's going to be important for the story of the game. You can see that I still did gray box out some buildings here. I didn't end up necessarily keeping them a one-to-one of what they are in the initial layout, but all the foliage and everything is for the most part what I plan to roll with. And with a bit of elbow grease, I set up a cozy little mountain town like I mentioned, and I got a couple of houses that have been set up. They actually have interiors and everything, though I'm not necessarily sure how much I plan to use said interiors, but they all look really nice. They're very modular as well, so if I need to change stuff, I can do that without any real hassle. But I'm just super stoked to develop a story in this town. I think it's going to be a great place to learn the game a little bit, and more on that in a moment, but also kind of get you set up with the lore of the world, kind of where you are, why things are the way they are, as well as give you a hub to kind of get your early items, weapons, armor, spell books, and a place to stay, so that way you can rest your weary body. But working on this map, I realized a fatal flaw in the fixed isometric camera angle that we were going with, like I kind of hinted at in the intro, and that is your camera clipping into buildings and not being able to see your player, what's going on around them, etc. And that's kind of a game-breaking issue. At least it's a big hurdle that I needed to sort out. And there's a few options that you have, but all of them have their own various benefits and drawbacks. One of the big ones is going to be an outline system where you can have it set up so a mob or a player or whatever, whenever they are occluded by something, will show up when they are behind a wall via an outline, kind of like Left 4 Dead sort of thing. And I got it set up on the player, but I wasn't necessarily quite super proud of it because I felt like even if you were still behind something, it was hard to see really what you were running into if something was a little low. And aside from just, designing my maps with all of that in mind, I really wanted to come up with a solution that was agnostic of whatever the map had going on in it. And after toying around with this post-processing shader for a while, which I admit looks pretty dang cool, I ended up opting into something called occlusion masking, which without being too technical basically just means that it will mask out, which means to remove or nullify the pixels of anything that is within a certain range, in this case between the camera and the player. But I definitely had some issues like masking out things that I shouldn't be. And this goes back to the way that a lot of these assets are set up, with the textures that are assigned to them all basically being one giant texture, and then it's kind of all or nothing. And I wasn't quite happy with the way that it was looking. So I knew I wanted to probably use a system including both of those things, the post-processing shader as well as the occlusion, but there was quite a bit of growing pains and this took a lot longer than I wanted it to. And after a few days, I decided to take a break and I got to work on the dungeon, what I have dubbed D1 to the first town. And it ended up being quite a bit of fun. Initially, I just set it up so there was a teleportation way of getting in there, and it didn't include saving and loading or anything like that, but it did let you go in. And after about a day and a half, I had what I consider to be a very cool, very spoopy looking dungeon, complete with volumetric fog, ambient lighting, as well as some green lighting to let you know that you are indeed in a dirty, gross place, because green lighting is dirty and gross, right? But yeah, there's lots of goblins that will spawn in here because they are going to be the kind of initial plague of the town for the training dungeon. And of course, at the end, you're going to have a boss troll that you can fight. You should get some loot from them, but the major thing is it is going to allow you to progress in the story. The troll will one-shot you early on, so you're going to have to train up for it. But I want to avoid spoilers, so that's all I'm going to tell you about it for now. And so while I still haven't sorted out the camera movement or how I want to handle that sort of stuff, I do feel like I've got a system that is partially working, and I would be curious if you guys have any feedback or any sort of experience working with this sort of fixed isometric camera, because this is a problem and I've been working on it for like a week and a half and I cannot quite get it working. I would really love to see what you guys think in the comments below. But that's going to wrap it up for today. I'm super stoked with the progress I made since the last check-in. We've got glowing items, we've got combat with varied enemies as well as loot, and most importantly, we've got some really pretty maps. And I'm very happy with how much I've challenged myself with this project. It is definitely making me go places I have never gone before. Like I said in the intro, if you are interested in joining the Discord, you can check that out, linked in the description below. I'm also talking to some people about maybe getting some music commissioned for the project, so that is going to be really cool, and I'm really excited to share information on that with you guys in the coming months. But yeah, that's all I got for you for this one, and I hope to see you soon.